Hi, today's good person to know is Jonathan May. He's founder and CEO of Hubbub, a crowdfunding platform for the education sector, and is also director of the CrowdFunding Association. Hubbub is free of charge and they don't charge a commission, and it's not equity based either, and they've got a really snazzy angle unlike most other crowdfunding platforms I've come across. Jonathan has successfully gone through various rounds of funding throughout his entrepreneurial career, which haven't always worked out, but the best part about that is that he's learned valuable lessons along the way, so hopefully you won't make those same mistakes too. In this video, Jonathan briefly touches on the main crowdfunding platforms, but says the key is to work out how much money you're trying to raise and for what kind of project, because there are thousands of different routes to raising money, but what you need to understand is which one is right for you. He says the most important aspect of crowdfunding is to think about the networking effect. Why is what you're doing relevant to every single person that sees it? Because what you want them to do is share it with their networks too. He says there's a myth in crowdfunding that there's a crowd. There isn't. You've got to find the people. You've got to get them interested and excited in what you're doing. This is a really insightful video for anyone looking to raise money through the crowdfunding platform. And Jonathan's tips and myths, I hope, will make it that much easier for you. So good luck. I hope you enjoy this video and thank you for watching.
Hubbub was set up 3 years ago with a mission to help create the world's largest funding network for education sector projects. This is about my 8th or 9th startup. 2 of them are still running. Most of them are dead, which means I've screwed a lot of things up before, which is great because you learn from them. Now director of the UK CrowdFunding Association. My business went through the WIRA UK Acceleration Programme, which is backed by O2 Telefonica. We raised money through the Unlimited Big Venture Challenge Programme, so we had £100,000 in match funding from Unlimited because we're a social enterprise. We're for profit, but we have a social purpose and a social mission, so you can get money out of social enterprise funding if you're a for-profit as well. This is Hubbub.net, and on Hubbub.net anybody in education can go and crowdfund free of charge. We don't charge a commission, and you can use this platform for funding everything from going on a trip somewhere to funding a creative project, an idea or a business. Hubbub is rewards-based crowdfunding, so it's donations and you get something back. We do not do equity in debt, we don't do things like that, we don't do investment crowdfunding. Crowdfunding is really just the inevitable consequence of digitalization of technology, of process, right? You always go and ask people around you for money. You always go and ask your networks for support. Crowdfunding is just a more efficient way of asking those people for support. And the social network change, the social network movement has enabled those people to ask their friends for support, which is what's really galvanized it. There are lots of different types. There's rewards-based, which is the one most people would have seen, Kickstarter, Indiegogo. Equity is raising money from the crowd in return, and in return for the money, you get a stake, you get a share. So most of the people on these kind of platforms will be raising from 50,000 up to a few hundred thousand. Crowdcube is the leader in the industry, but there are a number of others. Everyone's experimenting in this space. There's lots of different ways of doing it. And I think one of the first questions that I would ask you to think about is how much money are you actually trying to raise and for what kind of project? And these are like the 2 most important questions when you're trying to decide where to actually go, because there are thousands of different routes to raising money, and for each of those routes there are thousands of different platforms you can go and choose. You need to then start looking at the platforms and looking at the scope and the scale of the projects and the kinds of things that are going to get funded. The most important part of crowdfunding, in any way used, the most important part of crowdfunding is to think about the network effect. Right? So why is your project, why is what you're doing relevant to every single person that sees it? One is every person you send it to send it to 1,000 other people. So there's a project on our site at the moment where somebody is trying to raise money to create a series of children's books talking about Parkinson's to children, to explain Parkinson's disease to children, to make it easier for families to deal with it. If you go and pitch this project to your friends and your family and to your networks as a book about Parkinson's and explaining Parkinson's to children, some people will find that highly relevant. Right? Some people will, because they know somebody with Parkinson's, or they've had to go through that process themselves, those people will share it. But most people won't find it relevant because most people haven't actually been touched by Parkinson's itself or had that specific problem of explaining it to children. However, if you start talking about explaining trauma to children, explaining diseases to children, and talking about neurological conditions, so it's not just Parkinson's, now we're talking about MS, now we're talking about Alzheimer's. So if you widen the net and you start thinking about who hasn't been touched by one form of neurological condition or another, who hasn't had to explain trauma and deal with trauma either as a child or as a parent or as a brother or sister. So all of a sudden you've turned a project from being a very small one-off project to being something where everybody can find some relevance in it. And that gives people a reason to share it with their networks. Even if they're not going to give you money, it gives them a reason to share it with people that they know will care. And that's the key whenever you're doing crowdfunding, is to figure out what that hook is and how you're going to actually encourage people to relate to your specific project and the thing that you care about. We've understood that what really matters is to create a network that cares about the projects, right? So we've tapped into that exact thing that I was talking about, which is, why do people care? Why will they share your project? And we've tried to embody that in the actual product. So Think Big has hundreds and hundreds, they've got thousands of youth projects every year that they fund, with anything from a few hundred to nowadays up to £10,000 worth of funding. They're looking at how they use this platform to create a network of backers for projects who will continue to care about and give over a period of time to those projects. And that's what we're trying to do with universities. I'm going to do some tips and myths. So there's going to be some tips about how to do crowdfunding and some myths about crowdfunding. The first myth is that there is a crowd. So there are not a bunch of crazy people out there who are like, you know, loaded and just desperate to give you money. The thing is, you've got to figure out why what your project's doing is relevant and why they'll give you money. Right? There's no crowd. So when people say, well, should I go on Kickstarter? Should I go on Indiegogo? Should I go on Hubbub? Right? We say it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, because ultimately there is no such thing as somebody out there who just wants to pour money into your bucket. What you need to do is build those networks yourself. There are some exceptions to that. So on Crowdcube and on Seeders and on some of the equity platforms, there is a small crowd, right? There's a small crowd of people who are looking to invest in your idea. And they're the kind of people that will jump in once you've hit 50, 60, 70% of your target. And the point is that it's because it captures people's imaginations, right? And those people spread it and spread it and spread it and spread it. Aardman used their own network, which is why they raised, and it's a brilliant budget, it's why they raised only just over what they were trying to actually get to. There are some tools you can use to help you plan. So most young people don't plan campaigns very well. They plan the video very well and they plan the text very well, but they don't plan the actual campaign of trying to raise money very well. Try and figure out where your networks actually are and who they are. One of the tools we've built is called Enrich Me. You can actually use it even if you plan to use Kickstarter. I don't mind, that's fine. Go on our site and use it. What you do is you upload your email contact database. We don't use it for anything else, it's yours, and we delete it afterwards. And we will tell you where those people are on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Skype, etc. So you can figure out who they are, how many followers they have, what their bio is and says, and that gives you all you need to figure out who you should be asking for your money and what your ask actually is. So this is a cool tool, use it. So Kickstarter has this model of all or nothing fund. If they didn't reach £75,000, they wouldn't have got their money. Right? So that's like an all or nothing. The money would never be taken from people's credit card, debit cards or PayPal accounts, and no rewards would have to be delivered. The project wouldn't go ahead. This is a great model where they actually have costs that they need to meet in order to deliver the project. It protects both sides. It protects people giving money, it protects the people running the project. Indiegogo has a model where you keep it all. Right? So whatever you raise, you keep. Those projects have much lower rates of raising money because actually there's no pressure to reach a target. And that pressure works both ways. It's not just pressure on you to reach your target, it's pressure on the person giving you money. The project's going to happen anyway, then they don't need to give you the money, and it doesn't create that same psychology of trying to reach this actual target by a deadline. We basically created this mechanism where you have a minimum you need, which is a minimum to make it work, and the actual target that you want as a dream. So this is an interesting idea. That's the minimum. I think it's about £1,000. We were finding that most young people, when they were trying to figure out what to do and how much they needed to raise, in an all or nothing model, they were going, well, I need £1,000, but I'd really like £5,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick a target at like 3,000, somewhere in the middle, 2,500. The problem is we're then finding people raising 1,500 or 2,000, so just short of the target they were actually trying to raise, therefore not getting the money, even though that was more than the amount they actually needed to make the project work. Originally they only needed 1,000. So rather than trying to expose this sort of slightly broken method, you know, of all or nothing, we give you both. And you can set this at 0 if you want. If you set this at 0, you keep everything. One of the things that helps institutions justify funding a project is if they can see the crowd is interested. Nesta match fund projects, unlimited match fund projects, universities match fund projects, Santander is about to start match funding projects on one or two of our white labels. There are lots of people out there who will offer match funding for your projects. So it actually increases the donor propensity by a factor of about 5. And for every donor that hits your page, normally you get about 10% of people decide to put money in. It's about 50% when you have a big banner at the top that says your donation is going to be done. So if you can find someone that's interested in match funding, even part of your project, that's a fantastic way to get funded. And there's some great examples, not just on our site, but also on Kickstarter and Indiegogo, where people have got match funding from, say, Nesta, or they've got a TSB grant to do something, and they just need to top up the money. So rewards. So if you give £1, you get a private production blog, article, something, you know, and these go all the way from, you know, maybe a postcard or a t-shirt, all the way up to an invitation to a preview event. One of the things that you need to think about is what they're for, and what your campaign is actually for. Because there are kind of two types of campaign. There's a campaign where you really just need the money to get the project off the ground. And there's a kind of campaign where you're really doing it because you want to create a community of people who will be your backers, who will be your supporters, who will be the people that will push your brand out and help you to actually make the thing succeed. You've got these rewards. These are a great way of 1 to 2 to 3 months after the project of getting back in touch with all of the people that backed you, of building the community and moving around your project. So think about not just, oh, well, how can I say thank you, but think about how can I leverage this amazing opportunity I have to build my first loyal customer base. And we get asked about IP, intellectual property, and patents and trademarks, but if I just tell everyone about my idea, won't people steal it? You will come up with thousands of ideas in your life unless you go and execute them and do them and build the networks and build the defensibility and the protection. It's an idea. Think about the networks that will actually help you protect it. Crowdfunding will not make it harder. In many ways, it will